All right, people, we'll be getting started here pretty soon. Just getting all the links set up. I got Lady Shel here, and we're getting ready to do a live stream. Today, we're going to do a Dungeon Master 101 class. Typically, this is what I teach a lot of new students. For some of you, this might be review. There may be some things you have forgotten, or possibly maybe even something new. So hold tight. We'll get rolling here in about 5 minutes, and we will be here to answer your questions. Lady Shel will be in the chat, and I will be running Fantasy Grounds. So see you soon. All right, all right.
Hi, YouTube.
Hello. We're live on Twitch, and looks like we have Flo with us today and Lady Shel. So, Lady Shel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and um, let the folks know what you're up to?
Well, let's see. I have been playing D&D and RPG games on Fantasy Grounds for the last year and a couple months. So I'm pretty new to it. Um, Basically, I would say D&D 5e is my jam, but I also like Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, Starfinder, Savage Worlds, and I haven't played a game in Call of Cthulhu, but I'm looking forward to it. We are growing our Call of Cthulhu community on Fantasy Grounds College, and if you are interested in Call of Cthulhu and want to take a character creation class, we've got those, and we've got where you can take your character that you have built and take it out for a test drive and investigate and try not to die in a kind of a one shot type of a game. It's not, I wouldn't call it a combat because Call of Cthulhu is more role play rather than combat based. But I'm looking forward to doing that. And today we're going to be having this DM class. Hopefully, we'll get through it, unlike yesterday with the technical issues, because I believe Laerun has figured out what was wrong with his computer and everything should be fine again. I'm still showing the video from yesterday. It's because I'm looking at the chat and it's showing what was from yesterday, what we
Hmm.
said yesterday. So I don't know why it's doing that, but anyway. So weren't you glad you asked me about myself? Because I just like talked your ear off. But hey, I'm Lady Shel. I talk a lot.
Definitely a little long-winded at times, but she means well. Lady Shell has been a very active supporter in our community, and without her, I don't think I'd have half my classes scheduled, and I don't even know what I'm doing from day to day sometimes. So she's been very helpful with that. She's going to be moderating in the chat, so if any of you have any direct questions, just ask in the chat and we'll answer them. And I think I want to get started here. The main thing I want to cover here is some basics. Maybe it would be a refresher for some of you.
I'm still seeing yesterday's video playing right now. I'm on
I'm
here and
not
I'm
sure.
yeah, it's showing yesterday's video.
Huh. Okay. Well, I'm seeing that I have a live video here. I'm not. I don't see yesterday's video, so I'm not sure.
There, I just clicked on the Fantasy Grounds College live, and now it went to the commercial. So here we go. There's Behold D and
Y-
something here.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem, Vic. I understand. So now, the first things we're going to cover here is connectivity, setup, that sort of thing. So let's get going here. So now, this is the typical screen that you'll come across when you first start up Fantasy Grounds. Generally, when you're new to Fantasy Grounds, a lot of this stuff will be very daunting or very unfamiliar. So if you've never DM'd with Fantasy Grounds, but you are familiar with your favorite rule set, Fantasy Grounds is definitely one of those programs you want to get to learn. And the more time you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. So this will be very good for you. First things first, when you create Fantasy Grounds or when you install it, it creates a directory, and a direct access to that is up here on the top right. There's a little icon, it's Open Data Folder. If you click that, it will basically give you the folders access to anything that you have in your library that has to do with the Fantasy Grounds directory. So you'll find your modules folder, which will have all your campaigns. You'll have an extensions folder where if you have any third-party extensions that extend Fantasy Grounds functionality, that's where they go. And if you have any third-party modules or things that you're working on, they'll go in the modules folder. And then there is a tokens folder as well. So those are just some of the directories that you'll find in this little icon folder. Now, as far as license status goes, when you are a new DM and you want to start running campaigns and you want to host people, you need to make sure you at least have a standard license or the ultimate. And the ultimate license gives you the availability to host demo accounts and the standard accounts and also other ultimate accounts. So this is why it's unlimited, is because I have the ultimate edition. It costs a little bit of money, but I think in the long run it's pretty much worth it. The next thing you can consider is if you have a bunch of players and they are basically trying to um, play on your table, you may want to consider putting in a pool of money and having your players help you purchase whatever setting that you're going to run. That way, the burden of cost isn't all on the DM. So the next thing is in this panel here, these are all the direct links to all of the Fantasy Grounds support. There's videos, manual, there's a release notes. These will take you to the forums or to a wikis. So don't pass these up if you need help. And then again, there's a check updates. So Fantasy Grounds or Smiteworks, they do updates every Tuesday. So if you want to update your client, that usually happens Tuesday. And if you're going to be playing a game Tuesday, it is advised not to update your game right before. So don't update Fantasy Grounds right before your game starts. So again, that's on Tuesdays that they usually post updates. You have the settings button, and this is where you would set your account data, You put your license key in there if you have one. You need to put in your Fantasy Grounds username and password that you use to access the website. That way you have access to the internal store, and it also pulls in all your updates and any content that you've purchased. Another thing you can set there is your scale. So you can scale your user interface. It's scale UI. You can set the percentage. And if you have a pretty nice sized monitor, I think about 80% is roughly a really good number, maybe 85, depending on how large your monitor is. And last but not least, I'm going to create a campaign. And it's really not really a campaign. This is just going to be called create campaign. This is how they decide to name it. I think it would be better served if we had a different title, but create new campaign is what you're going to push. So I'm going to go ahead and name this. So I'm just going to call it DM101 Twitch for lack of a better title. If you want to use a different name than your default username, you can put in like DM so and so, such and such. And then the next thing is we're going to have a what do you call it? A password that you can potentially put on here. So the password makes it to where you can basically block out or keep others from trying to join your game without your permission. So if you need to password protect that, you can also put that in here. Generally, that's not a problem, but every now and then you need to password protect it. And you can change the password when you're already in. The next thing here is 5E. That's the rule set that I'm going to be showing today. After that, it's going to take me to the extensions. Now, when you're new to Fantasy Grounds, you want to make sure that you don't use too many extensions and that you understand what they do and make sure that you research them before you activate them. So for this particular tutorial and class, I'm going to click just this GM icon, which is a custom icon created for the chat window. I'm going to click on this font, which is just to make the font a little bit bigger. And this is a custom made extension that was created by Matakire in our community so that it's a little bit easier to see. And then the next thing I'm going to click on is a theme, which was created for our Founders Day, which is coming up July 26th to the 28th. And we're going to have All Things Fantasy Grounds show with Rob Tui and a bunch of our community members. So that'll be a lot of fun. And I don't think I need any other extensions because that'll just add to confusion. So I don't want to add too many extensions to confuse any new DMs out there. So now I'm going to go ahead and click this run test. And if you do not get the success status, then you will need to go ahead and try to figure out your port forwarding and your networking issues, because generally you have to open up port 1802 to allow outside users to connect to your computer. Your computer is designed to help keep out inside intrusion, so there's a firewall and possibly antivirus, and then some settings in your router or your modem that you'll have to change to get this to come through. I'm not going to explain how to do that because that is a very long, drawn out process that a lot of people struggle with. And it is also something that was unique to each person's setup. So if you need help for that, go to the official Fantasy Grounds forums, or you can come to the college and ask the experts, and I'm sure there'll be some people there to help you with that. And then there is also some cases where you won't be able to connect at all. So once the new Unity version comes out, hopefully this problem will go away. So next, I'm going to hit start. And while that's loading, I want to give a shout out to Rob Tui, to FGC, also to Smiteworks for making this awesome software, and also all the other supporters and streamers out there that have dedicated their time and ads to help grow our community. I couldn't do this by myself. I have a lot of good volunteers and helpers, and I'm hoping that we will be able to continue this, and that will be the next thing. So in this session, I will be doing this DM101 class, and we might go over some more advanced topics. But for this class, we are just going to do a basic run through Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is a very brand new to new players. That's the module that I recommend. It is something that came out in the beginning. It's the starter set for D&D 5th edition, which was originally called D&D Next. So the module itself is designed for new DMs and new players. So that is why I'm going to start with that. Okay, so when you first start Fantasy Grounds, you will get this pop-up window. This is your campaign setup. This is direct links to any help on the forums or a user manual link or a wiki user guide. So you can get to this from here. If you need any help, this is a nice direct link to that. Also, if I hit next, this takes us to data modules. Now this is where you'll load the books up from your library. Now I am assuming that you have an ultimate license or at least a standard license and that you have purchased a few of the core books. Now if you don't own the core books and you only have the license, you'll have the SRD and the basic rules, which you can build upon that and enter your own data. But that is a very long process, and that is something you have to learn and develop over time. But if you want to make things quicker and you want to get going, I recommend buying the core books, which is the Monster Manual, the Player's Handbook, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, if you're playing another rule set, obviously those will be different books. And if you are using Fantasy Grounds for either D&D or any of the other rule sets, all this data here will be very similar, not exactly the same. And some of these banners over here might look a little different or they might be called something else, but generally the items are in the same location. So I'm going to just click 5E core rules. And what this does is tells Fantasy Grounds to scan my library and load the 3 core rule books. Very shortly, I'll get a confirmation. There it is. So you got these check marks. If you're missing any of these books, it will still load. It'll just give you an X, which means you don't have it in your library. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And I'm going to click modules. So here are the modules that I have in my library. And as you can see, there's a ton of them. And I do not recommend getting 50,000 modules like I have here. You want to manage that third-party stuff as much as possible. And you also want to make sure you're using it. I have to go through my library and manage all this stuff. So I got to see what I actually use and what I don't use. So anyways, I'm going to look for, by name, Lost Mine. And here it is. So I'm going to click load. For the sake of this class, I might show you my pregens if we have time. So I'm going to go ahead and load those. These are pregens that I created on my own so that they will supplement this game. And they are more conducive to playing and having a lot less problems because the pregens that come with this module are a little bit out of date and they're not quite up to snuff with the latest D&D 5e rules, because you have to remember that this was created in the very beginning. So these are made directly from the D&D Next playtest. So I made my own revised pregens just so I don't have to deal with changing and fixing these every time I run the module. So the next step is I'm going to show you how the library works, and that'll come after I hit this. I'm going to close this data module activation first, and then I'm done with this campaign setup, and now you have this tokens module area. I don't recommend buying a ton of token packs unless you understand what's in them. And the reason I say that is because I'm crazy and I went out and bought 50,000 token packs and I have no idea what's in half of them. So if you're going to do that, make sure you research them, write them down, whatever it takes. But I have no clue what's in any of the modules that I have purchased that are third-party tokens. So be careful with that. Like I have 2 or 3 of these packs that say things that go bump in the night. Well, unless I open them and preview them, I'll have no idea what's in them. And it's not a good idea to open every single token module you have, because that will definitely crash Fantasy Grounds. So just be cautious and take your time and develop some sort of system where you can understand what you've actually purchased. Don't go buck wild like I did, because I have no clue what half this stuff is. So just make sure you're careful when you're buying artwork and tokens, and make sure you're going to use them too. So that's just my personal opinion, but if you want to go out and buy them, then by all means go for it. So after I've loaded a couple token modules, I'm going to move on. But if you don't have the core books, Fantasy Grounds does come with free tokens and some free letter tokens. And not to mention, there's some POGs. And here it says Devon Knight Token Bundle. Now, if you only own a couple of those, I wouldn't mind clicking that button. That will open those up. But if you own more than about 10 of them, I don't recommend clicking that. Because if you own all 50 of his collections, that is going to really bog your computer down and make it crash, probably. So just be very careful with that. So I'm going to hit next. And this takes you to the options menu. Now, this is actually this gear cog. So when you click on the campaign setup and you click options, this is what comes up. The other way to get here is to click the gear cog. So that is that, and it kind of completes the circle. So if you close that and you want, oh darn, I want to go back, you just click setup and it takes you back. Now, if you don't want this setup window to come back when you start this campaign again after you're done, you want to click this, and that'll stop it from loading every time you connect. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is show you a couple options. I don't want to go through all this. Rob and I have already done 2 or 3 videos on this stuff, and this is also trial and error for a lot of new people, but I will show you a couple things as we go through the class. So one of the things you can do is you can change this decal back here. A lot of people like to play with that. A lot of the official books, they come with artwork, and that will be basically uh, the modules or player's handbook. They'll have a little bit of artwork that you can load, and that's this background image. So I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to actually, you can turn it off, which I usually do during my campaigns, because I think the artwork is sometimes distracting. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put on our Founders Day weekend icon. And this is what we're going to be doing later on this month. So this whole thing is themed for the upcoming Founders Day weekend. And this was created by Shehob in our community, and she did this kind of like as a gift to me, which is really nice. Okay, so next thing is the dice tower. Now, if you turn on the dice tower, it'll say table dice tower on. And what that'll do is it'll show it on the client side, but on the DM side, you will not see the dice tower. So your players will see it, but you won't. So if you want to see it also, for some reason, you need to click Chat, Show GM Roles, turn that on. Here's a little dice tower here. This is a little custom dice tower that was made for the theme. I unlocked it by right-clicking on it, and I'm moving it over next to my dice, and I'm going to right-click on it again, and that will definitely keep it in place. And if you drop a dice in there, the little dragon icon pops up. But anyways, this is for a hidden roll. So when you roll in here, only the DM sees the result. And the reason you'd use this is for role-playing reasons, to keep the metagaming down, and to keep the suspense up. So this is a really good tool for storytelling and for hidden rolls. So that's what that's for. The next thing I'm going to do is clear all this advertising and licensing data. And I'm going to unlock this. And I'm going to stretch it here and kind of shrink it a little, so I don't need it that big. And that will take care of that. And the reason I'm doing that is because you don't need a ton of space, especially vertically. So I need to use this space for other things, or I might want to dismiss something, put something else in here. So that's why I shrunk it down. And I'm just kind of line it up so it looks nice and uniform. And for some reason, if you're playing around with the dice and you drop them and they go all over the place, all you have to do, instead of trying to place them back manually, is right click on the background, click on Arrange Dice, and they'll all go back in order. So the next step is I'm going to close this options menu for now. I will be coming back to that as necessary. And I'm going to open up the combat tracker. So the combat tracker is something that you're going to be using all the time, and you want to have it strategically placed. And as you see, I have a little room up here, and that's because if I have any players join my table, they will be visible up here. And if I have that all the way up, I won't be able to see that. So I just have a habit of leaving a little bit of room there. And then I'm going to go ahead and stretch this bottom right corner, stretch it down. And here we go. This is the chat window. Here's the combat tracker. This is the way I'm laying out the table. So it's a lot more conducive to running the game, and I know where everything's at. So here I'm going to click /save. So the right slash or forward slash is a command, and I'm going to type save and hit enter. You will get campaign saved as a confirmation. That helps me ensure that Fantasy Grounds has created a directory and a campaign folder before I move on. So I want to keep all my settings and keep everything set up. The next thing is, let's see, I'm going to bring out the party sheet. Now I'm not going to use this right now, but this is about where I'm going to place it. Once I have it placed, I don't want to be moving this thing around all over the place. So get in the habit of dismissing the windows instead of moving them and closing them. So for instance, if I need the space up here where the combat tracker is, just dismiss it from the buttons up here. You don't have to move it out of the way. Once you have this in place, you want to try to keep it where it is. Same thing with the party sheet. I don't have to move that right now, but I don't need it right now, so I'm going to go ahead and dismiss it. So let's take this, and I'm going to click on the party sheet button, and it dismisses it. But I still want it to come back here when I use it later. Another thing you can do is change the color of your dice if that's important to you. Up here in the upper right, there's a color palette. You can use this color wheel to change the intensity of how much color you want to change. You can color the text black or white. As of now, I don't know of any way to skin the dice. That may be a future development when Unity comes out, but for now, you're stuck with the primary colors and black and white text. So as you can see, I can change this. I got this Rob Tui purple, I guess is what you call this. And this is also one of the things that some people do when they're having bad luck with dice. They'll change the color of their dice to help them through a bad time of bad rolls. So I don't know if it does anything, but some people believe it does. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the colors. The hardest color to make is brown because it's a combination of all three colors. So that's the color I got there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the library view. And this is important to know this, especially as a DM or a player. So click library. And what you've got here are these top buttons are all the different views that you can have. So you have the GM view, and this pretty much assumes that you got everything set up, or maybe you're running a pre-made module and you're all set to go. You hit play. This is basically all you need as a player. If your characters are built, this is pretty much all you're going to need. Now for Create PC, this is what you want your players to be on when they're building and creating characters with you. And I do recommend that you do that before your game and you get with 1 or 2 people at a time. And do not try to bring 5 people in at once. It's not recommended. It slows down the client and it can make for some serious chaos. So try to get with your players before you start your session 0 and work with them individually or maybe in pairs. Okay, so the next thing is I'm going to click all. Now this pretty much shows you all the banners that are available in Fantasy Grounds. And the reason I'm going to leave this here, because I'm going to go through all this stuff during this tutorial. So I want to make sure that you know about these presets up here, and you can also customize them. So if you want to take some of these banners away, or you want to add some if you're in a different mode, you can change it here. So that is a way to customize your view for all these banners on the right. And then here you have your library. Now the library is a place that gives you kind of a summary and a combination of things. So in other words, if you have the player's handbook and you actually want to look at the digital representation of the book itself, you can click here. You get all these menu items on the right hand side. And some of these will correspond with these banners over here. Not all of them, but some. The one you won't find over here for sure is a reference manual. Now, the reference manual is the digital representation of any given core book. Now, not all the core books have a reference manual, most of them do. Most of the third party products do not have a reference manual. Unless you know what you're doing, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but you can make a reference manual, but you have to have extensions and a little bit of knowledge on how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and click this player's handbook. That drops down all these chapters here. The next thing I'm going to do is click on chapter 1, which is character creation. And as you can see, you got all the pages like you would have in your player's handbook or monster manual, whatever you're looking at. I just chose the player's handbook to show you this. One thing you want to remember as a DM is that if you have your players creating a character in this order, it's not going to turn out right for D&D 5th edition. If you want to make sure or ensure that you have a better shot at not screwing the characters up, please scroll down a little further. You'll notice this instruction here, which is what we had requested of Smiteworks to add this because it supersedes this and it puts in the Fantasy Grounds steps instead of using the pen and paper version. So you want to go through your ability scores, your background race, and then add class. That is the order you want to do things in. If you don't do that, your character sheets will get screwed up. And also, if your players pick something wrong, like they add like half elf and they go, oh, wait, I don't want that. I want dwarf. That's kind of a faux pas. You don't really want that because there's no way to go back. So you're better off starting over than trying to fix the character sheet. So I'm not going to get too deep into the character creation. That is a whole nother class and another 2-hour session, but I just wanted you to be aware of that possible problem. Okay, so that was the reference manual. Another thing you can do in reference manuals is, for instance, if you want to look for something, let's say you want to look for languages, you can type here, and then it will kind of narrow this down, and here's languages here. So if you click on that, it'll show you all the different languages in the 5th edition standard rule set. If you wanted to look this up later and come back here, you can pop this page out. I'm going to close the reference manual, and here's the language page. And then if I wanted to keep it around and not dismiss it, I could drag this down and put it in the hotkeys down below. So you have shortcuts down here, and you have different combinations of Alt, Shift, and Tab, and you can have several shortcuts if you want. But normally, if you got more than 12 up here, I'm not sure why you need more than that. But anyhow, this is a really nice feature, and get used to dragging and dropping links, because this is what this Fantasy Grounds program does best. So here's a link to this page. So if I accidentally close it, I can pop it right back up. The next thing is in this particular library, I'm going to click on Lost Mine of Fendelver. and you'll notice that it has encounters and images and magic items, NPCs. Well, all this stuff here, or most of it, corresponds with these banners over here, but not everything. One of them, besides the reference manual, is the pre-generated characters. So this module comes with them, and the only way to access them is from the library view. There's no banner or button over here for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click these green plus buttons. That will add them to this campaign. Now, not all modules have pre-gens. I think, as a matter of fact, very few. So I'm going to go ahead and click characters, which is the screen that you'll use when you want to import, export, or create characters from scratch, or they will show up here if you add them from the pre-gens. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus button on all 5 of these. So what that does is it pulls it from the software into the actual character selection window. And at this point, your players, when they connect to your table, these will now be visible for them to claim. Now, for my own module that I created, it's the same characters. I just added a little bit more automation. I used a lot of Rob2E's coding effects. I made some notes, did some things a little differently because the ones they give you are a little bit off. So if you want to create your own and add them to your campaigns, you can make your own pre-gen module, or you can go to the DM's Guild. There's plenty of modules there that have pre-gens, and I know that there's one out there by Rob, and I kind of helped him a little bit in the beginning with that. But anyways, so this is the same pre-gens, but I have revised them. That's why they're titled a little bit differently. So I'm going to add these. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I go to show the combat later, I do not want to be messing around. So that's that. All right, so here's the characters. Basically, I have duplicates of everything, and that's because I have the standard ones that come with the module, and then I have the revised ones. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what's different. So here's the High Elf Acolyte. The High Elf Acolyte is one of the main characters in Lost Mine of Phandelver as a pregen. So assuming you're not bringing in your own characters, this is what you're getting. There is some slight differences here. For instance, back then, I guess an elf was just an elf. They didn't have it come in as a high elf because it's a little bit different here. All the other stuff's the same, like the stats, the dex, and whatnot. But the way it handled parsing was a little different back then. And also the senses don't come over through, and I'm not sure why, but that's another difference. So this dark vision is automatically added to your character sheet, whereas I think before you might have had to done that manually. So I'm going to click the skills. All that should be the same. I didn't change anything there. The abilities tab is where these two things get different. So you have these features. Those are all the same. You have your traits. This is where it's different. So they give you dark vision, Fey ancestry, and trance on the old one. But the new one that I created with the updated rule set gives you your cantrip option, so you can pick a cantrip. And in this case, in parentheses, I put Thunderclap because that's the cantrip that this character would choose. But if you were going to use this, you can change that. Elf weapon training. They do have the weapons down here listed, but they don't have the trait listed. So this has the notes. So before you'd have to look that up and then add them manually to this section. It looks like they've already done that for you, but it's also done here. You also have keen senses. So it says you have proficiency in the perception skill. That is automatically added when you make the character and you add the race. So I think before you had to add it manually. The languages are the same. The inventory, what I did with this is the module gives you this inventory, but I just gave this particular NPC all the standard gear so that they'll have a little bit more stuff to work with, and it's not so toned down. And then the starting gold in the module is 5 gold, and I just gave them the standard starting gold. So I'm not sure why this was so different back then, but and this character is not true to the module, but I did try to stick with most of the stuff that this character had to begin with. The only extras are some equipment. And then I gave this guy a quarterstaff and the short blade. The other thing I've done is organize the inventory. So rather than having everything all over the place or just having one big list, I actually have an organized list of all the packs. And I can see an error here that I made. So there's a case crossbow. So this is a case for a crossbow bolt. So I'm going to delete this because I had it on the same line. And I'm going to type the case here. And I'm using a capital C. And there, now it is in the correct container. So that is how you containerize items. And what it does is it indents them and it makes it so you know what is in which container. So like I have a pouch with a few small things in it. I have the case and I have a backpack. Now, if you want to drop the contents in the backpack, you would simply have your players click this to where it's unequipped and it changes the notes down here for how much weight they're carrying. So if I put it back on, the amount increases. So the next thing, notes. I pretty much left it the same. The only thing I did is I gave it gender and age, height, and weight. And I gave this character the alignment of chaotic good, which is what the original had, but they don't have it spelled correctly because they left the capital G off. So this has capital C, capital G. This needs to be on there if you want the spells to work correctly for Fantasy Grounds. Also, your size needs to be there. I'm not sure why size didn't pull over on the original, but your size does need to be there. And normally, now the rule set is updated, that comes in automatically. So if you don't have a size here, something's broken. Also, this character worships Agma, so I went ahead and added that to the deity. And then all the other background information, I left it the same. All the lore and stuff and the character's backstory, all I did was I kind of straightened it out and put a little bit of division in here or divided it up a little bit so it's not so jumbled together. And then last but not least is the actions tab. So with this character here, this is what you're getting when you have the standard player's handbook or the SRD. And this is a fully customized version of this character with all or more standard actions than this character has. So what we have here is some of Rob Tui's coding effects mixed in with some things so you can keep track of your inventory and some standard actions and then the wizard abilities, whereas this only has the spells. Another thing is this character has more than one weapon. They have a short sword, a quarterstaff, and a light crossbow, whereas this character does not. So that's the difference between the standard characters and the ones that you can make yourself. And a lot of this was created with Rob Tui's coding effects, with the exception of the consumables. I added that so it makes it a little easier for you to check off your inventory, and then you can adjust your backpack later on after the session. I'm going to change these to actions now. And as you can see, these are fully coded. These don't really have all the descriptions that Rob had put in there. And you don't have the standard actions or the arcane recovery, which is just pretty much a note. But when you use it, you can check it off. And then when you rest, it'll recover. So that there again, that's all character creation stuff. But this is the difference. This is why I added these characters instead of the standard ones. So I'm going to get rid of the characters I'm not going to use. So I'm going to delete this high elf character. You do that by right clicking and confirming. I'm going to get rid of this hill dwarf that came with the original module because I know it's kind of broken. Let's see, the human folk hero and the human noble. And last but not least, the Lightfoot criminal. So now I have all of these are my custom revised edition of the pre-gens. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the chat, kind of clean everything up. And now the next thing you do is after all your characters are created and built, you add them to the combat tracker. A lot of people will try to add them to a map or a battle map. That's not what you do in the beginning. You need to have them on the combat tracker so that they can track their movement and their combat. So here is the pre-gens. I'm just dragging them over, and they're all here in a list here. So now I have all the characters added to the combat tracker. Once I'm done, I'm going to close this. The next step is I'm going to open up the party sheet. So I'm going to open that up. There's where I left it. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and drag it up here for a minute. And I'm going to add all the player characters to this party sheet. Now, when you have guest players or animals or companions, you don't want to add them to the party sheet unless you are willing to share the experience points and the gold. If you don't want that and it's just an animal or some kind of temporary NPC, do not add them to the party sheet. That's just a recommendation. So the next thing is I'm going to put this back where it went, and I'm going to go over the party sheet once we get some of this other preliminary stuff out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the party sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the calendar. Now, a lot of people don't know how the calendar works, nor do they care. I actually think the calendar in here is pretty decent. It's a good tool. It's free. It comes with Fantasy Grounds. It's a really good way to organize your campaign. So I'm going to click Modules because the calendar is a module, and I know there's been other people who've created their own calendars, so it is doable. You just have to make your own module out of it. So I'm going to search for calendar, and here we go. And that is the calendar. And now I'm going to pick a calendar. Now, depending on the setting you're playing in, you could use a setting-based calendar. But in this case, I'm just going to use the standard Gregorian calendar that we're all pretty much familiar with. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And here we go. So the calendar is kind of handy in a couple different ways. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the year, which is 2019. Now, if you're in a game setting, you can put the game setting in there. Now I'm going to click the era, so this would be AD. So I'm going to click a day on here when we're going to get together and actually play. So I've added the year and the era, and now I'm going to click on the day. So let's just say next week we're going to have a campaign. So I'm going to go to July, and let's see, 7/5. So let's say next Friday we're going to have a game or something. So let's see, the 12th. So if I double click on that, it'll give me an entry. And I'm going to set this down. I'm going to set the calendar. But before I do that, I want to set the time. So you single click in that cell, you move your mouse button forward, and it will advance it from AM to PM. And that's how you use that. So let's say we're going to start at 1 p.m. in the afternoon on Friday, and it's going to be on the 12th. Once I'm done, I'm going to click this set selected calendar date, and it'll put a little blue dot there, and it will also allow you to click here. That outputs the time and date here, and it gives you a record, and it will also record to your chat log, so you can review this later if you need to. So this is the day that I've chose for our group to get together. So up here, I'm going to put session 0. And for the players, I'm just going to put start of game or something like that. So this is kind of like a journal and a way to keep organized. So now that I have that, now what I'm going to do is go ahead and save this or just close it. You can link it however you want to do it. But I think for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and close it. And what this does is it creates a journal. So you'll have a log, and then everything in that log will be in order. So this is one way to use the calendar. You can also use it in a campaign setting where you have to keep track of time for some reason. This might be useful for that as well. So now that I have the date set, I'm going to start making some notes. And this is something I recommend that you do, especially as a new DM, so you don't get miscombobulated and have a bunch of problems trying to figure out where you left off and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a note, and a note is just something I'm going to use in this campaign. The notes are private unless you make them shareable. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new note, click the plus button. I'm going to call it session 0. I'm going to drag my log from here. So this particular session, this is session 0, drag it here, and that gives me the date, and any notes that came from that game session would go in here. And then I'm going to link these notes into my GM calendar. So now I have the notes here, and they are both cross-linked. So if I lose one of them or I forget, they're both there. So now the next thing I'm going to do is start opening up the campaign, see what I need to research, see what things I need to do to get this set up. So I have the date set up, all the characters are made. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to do for session 0. So hopefully I've already read through some of the module, but I will show you some steps on that. And then I'm going to take you through combat, and then we're going to open the stuff up for questions and maybe an aftermath, something like that. So has there been any questions so far, Lady Shel?
Not yet. I
Okay.
was mentioning that I'm pretty sure it was yesterday maybe that you had said that if you write things in your character sheet in the notes section, that other people can read it.
No, they cannot.
Okay, then maybe I was confused with notes
Nope.
from the banner notes.
Nope, they can't read that unless you click public. So,
Okay. But he told me that if you put your, because whoever I was talking to said, oh, if you're gonna like screw over your party and like steal all their stuff, don't put it in your notes section because then everybody can read it.
I don't think that's true. Because I can't
Okay.
access anybody's sheet. The only thing I can think of is if you share the party sheet, that'll show what the combined inventory is. But other than
Yeah,
that,
that's
there's no way.
inventory, not notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
well, I don't know who I was talking to or
hmm.
why they said it, but I guess they were wrong.
Yep.
Disregard my note, people.
Okay. So the next thing is I'm going to open up the module. But before I do that, I'm going to show you the layout and how the modules are set up. So the first thing is the visual stuff, like the maps and the artwork.
Can you talk louder? I mean, turn up your mic or something.
Yep.
Rob said he can't hear you very well.
Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this out so that you understand how modules are laid out. So here's the images and maps. The next thing I'm going to put in here is the heart of everything, which is a story. And then the next thing is NPCs, which is basically where all the NPCs reside for your campaign and from your monster manuals and such. And then I'm going to bring over encounters. So your encounters are made up from NPCs. So I'm going to put those together. So click encounters. There you go. Those kind of go together. And then I'm going to do items. So this is all your custom items or stuff you get from your source books. And I'm going to do parcels. And parcels are made up of coins and also items. So I kind of put those together. The next thing is tables. Use those for randomization or for generation. And then I'm going to also bring over the quest items. So these are non-combat goals that would be conducive to solving a certain section of a module or some sort of goal in which you can award your players. So here's all the sections of a module, or at least most of them. And
there's the robot, by the way.
yeah, this is the
See the
robot.
little robot?
So you got the head, the body, the arms, and the legs. So this kind of helps me remember how these things are laid out. Now the next important thing is see how all these groups have all here. You don't need to have everything available to you if you're just running the module. Now if you're creating things or you need to build stuff, that may be different. But as far as running the Lost Mine of Phandelver, I'm going to start filtering this out. So here you have the NPCs that are exclusive to the module. And Lost Mine of Phandelver comes with a whole bunch of monsters, so it's pretty self-contained. Next thing is,
Laerun,
yes?
question. Okay, Mac Warhammer wants to know, are you trying to place the windows so that they open, when they open, they don't overlap?
In this case, with these, no. But in other cases, yes. So it depends on what's happening, but I kind of did that for room, so these overlap, because I don't have a ton of room to make the robot. But as far as when you're placing the major components of your campaign, then yes. You don't want a ton of overlap, maybe a little bit, but if you learn to dismiss them from the buttons and from these banners, you will have less of that. And I'll get into that later. So here I'm going to click on Lost Mines of Phandelver for the encounters. Maps and images, I'm just going to select one of them. They have this broken down into maps and artwork. I'm just going to leave the artwork here. And here's this. Story, obviously I'm going to start with the beginning. This is the intro. For tables, these don't show up till chapter 3, but I'm still going to filter it to that. And for Lost Mine of Phandelver quest items, I'm going to filter that. Parcels, same thing. And for the Lost Mine of Phandelver items, I'm just going to click on the standard items because there's different sections for like magic items and whatnot. So I'm just in the regular items here. So this is how this module's laid out. Now, not all modules are created the same, but if the module is large enough and well written, it'll contain most, if not all, of these elements. Some third-party modules don't contain everything. It all depends on what it is. You have map modules, you have token modules, you have things like that that don't require these. But a full-blown setting from like Wizards of the Coast or something like that, more than likely you're going to have all these different sections. So I wanted you to know that these are what makes up a module. So this is kind of the anatomy of that. So once you understand that and you learn how to use these filters and you learn how to make your own sections or your own groups, this program gets to be very awesome and you get to learn what it can do for you. So it is really easy to organize. So speaking of organization, now that I have this module out, now I'm going to pull over into my notes what I want to work on. So for instance, I should be looking at the background. I'm going to be looking at the overview, and I'm going to be looking at the adventure hook. And if you don't know anything about the Forgotten Realms, you may want to pull that over because that's where this campaign takes place. Now, you don't have to have it set in the Forgotten Realms, but this gives you an option. So that's all the information right there that I need to prepare for session 0. So I should know the background, the overview. The adventure hook kind of gives you some ideas on how to get the party together. And then the Forgotten Realms thing gives you a rough idea of the setting and it gives you direct links to maps that have the overland maps. So, for instance, you get this low res player map. You can kind of show the players at some points where they are in relation to where they started from. And any of these pins that are red are not visible to the players. So you don't have to worry about that if you share this. So that's what that's all about. So that should be enough information for you to review and prepare for the campaign. So I would do this ahead of time before the players have joined my table. We may have already created characters, but I still need to do my research and figure out what's going on before I run session 0. So session 0 could lead into a session 1, or I might just build a small little encounter to make sure the character sheets are working and that the players are getting along and they have chemistry. So that's generally what the session 0 is for, and also to establish the schedule. So that's all I care about right now. So I got the schedule, I got my research here. That's what I'm going to do for session 0. Once I'm done, I'm going to add my players to this. So right now, I'm going to add that. And what I'm going to do is just drag them over here. Now, some of this stuff I'm doing is unnecessary, but this is what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and add the characters. So I'm going to drag each one of these over here. That way I have a direct link to them. I don't have to open up the combat tracker. They're all right here. The reason I'm doing this is because later I'm going to put notes here. Whoever is playing this human folk hero, I'm going to put their email address and their Discord name or whatever, so I know who the hell this is. So I think this is Rob. And then if you know his email address, I'd put that after there. That way you can get a hold of these people a lot easier. So if this is a new table and you don't know anybody yet, this is a good way to organize that. So I'd go down the list, find out everyone's information, or as much as I could, and call it good. So that's my session 0. When I'm done, I would place this in my hotkeys, and when I come back to the table, I can bring that back up. So everything's organized. So I've read everything now. I know who my players are. The schedule is established. And now I'm ready to do session 1 because I'm happy that I know all these people now, or at least I know who they are and what they're doing, or at least what characters they're playing. I figured out that their chemistry isn't too bad and that the character sheets are correct. So that's what I'm doing in session 0. I'm also trying to think of a way to segue from the adventure hook that they give you into the actual campaign. Now, you don't have to follow their adventure hook. This is a suggested hook. So it depends on how you want to run your table. So now that I have all this kind of explained, I'm going to close these out and we're going to get started with actually setting up for the game itself, and I'm going to show you some combat. So the first step now, session 0 is over. All the players are on the combat sheet and they're in the party tracker, or the party sheet. So combat tracker, party sheet. So now here, the party sheet gives me an overview of all my party members. So in this first page, you can do group roles. You can have an overview of their passive perception, their armor class. You can keep track of their hit points. And if you have to, you can do ability score checks if need be from the screen. Another thing is you have these group roles. So let's say the party is traveling along the road and there's something in the module that says if they notice this, then this will happen or whatever. So the DC challenge rating on that particular section is a 12, or you can set that yourself depending on how you're feeling. And then I'm going to check the perception skill, because everyone should have that, even though they're not proficient. Everyone has a perception skill. And I'm going to change this result to hidden. And when I roll this, it rolls everybody's perception against that DC. So now I can go back and go, okay, success, failures, yes, yes, failed, failed, failed. So only 2 of them recognized whatever the challenge was for. In this case, they're passing along a road, they're supposed to notice a dead body or something like that. And maybe they smelt it before they saw it. But either way, that's how you could use a group roll. And instead of saying, okay, everyone roll perception, you've already rolled perception. Okay? So that doesn't tip them off. And you can work this into the story. The high elf and the human folk hero were the ones that smelled the body first. So maybe they are the 2 that are up front, or maybe they're on that side of the road. Who knows? But you can work that into your storytelling and say, okay, the high elf and the hill dwarf smell something god awful from the location that they are on the road, and then you can decide if they want to investigate and they find this body and so on and so forth. But that is how you would use a combined skill check with some good tips there, because I don't like announcing, okay, everyone roll perception, because that pretty much tells everyone something's coming up. If they don't notice and you say, okay, everyone roll perception, what was that for? And people are going to wonder what the hell's going on. So I would prefer to roll that in private. I'll know who passed and failed, and then I can describe that situation based off the degree of failure or the degree of success, depending on the challenge rating. So that is a good use of that. You don't have to use that. You could just say roll for perception, and everyone rolls. What if they all fail? Do they roll again? I mean, I don't know. So I think it's better sometimes to do the rolls in private, and then you can describe the situation. I don't think that would work in every situation, but I think in most you could use a hidden roll. So the next thing is you can do ability score checks or saves, and then you have this attack here, in which when you click the attack roll, what you can use this for is it makes a basic attack against all the party members. So it's basically hit or miss. What you can use this for is, let's say they come across a trap, or maybe they've walked into something, an ambush or something. You can click that, it rolls against all the targets at once, and then you can just judicate or read out loud like, oh, you stepped in horse manure, uh, the rest of you were able to walk around it, something like that. So that's used for that. Let's see. So that's that sheet. The inventory sheet is where a lot of people have issues, but it is one of the most useful aspect of Fantasy Grounds. So the party sheet on the inventory tab is where you can manage their inventory, you can buy, sell, and trade, and you can award them parcels. So I'm going to
I
pull
have a
up.
question.
Sure.
Okay, Shadzar wants to know, can't the DM roll an individual check from the player's character sheet and it goes into the tower?
Yes, that's another way to do it. But I figured if they're all together, I mean, you roll it and it rolls them all at once. If that individual is far enough away, or maybe they're scouting ahead, then I might do that. It just depends on the situation, but yes, he's right. You can do that. So let's see. So here I'm in the combined inventory, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a parcel, a random one. This comes from Lost Mine. There's a common room, I guess, somewhere in the adventure. I'm going to go ahead and drag this over and drop it in here. It gives you the coins and the treasure itself. I'm going to go ahead and grab another one just so I have more items. So now we'll just pretend that they have all this stuff, that they won it or they fought for it or whatever, or maybe even paid for it. What you have are all these items here, and right now it's marked at 50% of the value, and you already have the coins here. So one thing you need to know is some of the D&D items do not have a standard cost. So here's an earring. You open that up, that's 30 gold, that's great. You have common clothes. That's 5 silver. That'll divide evenly amongst the group. I'll leave that. If it's sold at 50%, though, that 5 silver will not divide evenly. So you may want to convert it to copper pieces, depending on what's going on. The next thing is magic items have a range, and that could be troublesome. So I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to set the value. It says 50 to 100. Well, if you sell that at 50 to 100, it does not convert properly. It will not sell it. So I need to set that value to a standard number of 75. And the weight, I'm going to give it 1 pound. It's a potion. So the potion of healing. So it should have, some sort of weight. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it. The next is the potion of invisibility. Now this thing says 5,000 to 50,000 gold. That is crazy. So I'm going to give it a $10,000 value. So 10,000 gold pieces. That's what I set the value. You can change it to whatever you need, and that should be good. So that's something I wanted you to be aware of. It's usually the magic items or special items that do not have the set price. So it's ideal if you create a store of your own before you start your campaign, but that could be a whole nother process. So anyways, so let's say that the party members won this treasure. This is the loot they gathered, and now they wanted to divide it up and sell it. So I'm going to go ahead and, first of all, I'm going to warn you that don't spend half your game working on the store. You want to do this either before or after if you can, unless the encounter at the store is related to the story directly. So in other words, don't have the party go to the store, buy a bunch of stuff, trade, spend 2 hours doing that if you intend on getting the adventure further along, because these sort of things can take quite a while. So I try to do a store day where they get together individually or as a team later on and do a little session, maybe an hour, where they buy, sell, and trade. Some people call that a market day, whatever, but I just don't want to run the campaign just to do coin transactions. I don't think it's conducive to the story. It really slows things down and it changes the whole pace. So if you can, try to get it to where the players do this before or after the session. And if it's a role-playing context thing, have the store set up and have the role-play stuff set up. And then you can still do the transactions later. You can just keep track of what they wanted to buy. So let's just pretend that they're at the store and they're getting ready to divvy out the treasure. And this half-elf or high-elf acolyte, she wants the earring. So I'm going to type her name in here. So now that item is assigned to her. So that means when I go to sell the items, it will keep it in a queue, and then when I award everything, it'll go to her character sheet. So I'll pull up her sheet now. And this is her character sheet. And I'm going to go to inventory. Now she has a whole bunch of crap in here. Maybe she wants to sell something. So she'll ask me, I have this tome of historical lore or this prayer book, whatever it is that she wants to get rid of. So she has a book that she has no idea why she has it. She doesn't want it. So I'm going to allow her to sell it. So she can drag this over to the party sheet, provided that I have shared that sheet. So the DM has the option to share this. So you have to go to Party, Show Inventory to Clients. That shares this page. And the marching order is Party, Show Characters to Clients, which is this page. So those are dependencies. So those have to be on if you intend on sharing these with the party. If that's the case, then she can drag over her spell book or whatever she wants to sell. In this case, it's just a random book. So she wants to throw that into the kitty. So she puts that there and it takes it off her sheet. I'm going to look here. It has a 25 gold piece value, so that's not too bad. There we go. So that's her contribution to the kitty. So now what we're going to have is a sell-off. We're going to go to a store. Maybe it's your market day that I was talking about earlier, whatever that might be. They get to the store, and the guy that's running the store is a real tightwad. He's only going to give you 50% of the value of anything you sell, which is BS. So you get to the store and you say, hey, we fought hard for this stuff. There's no way we're going to take 50%. So the guy says, okay, no sell. And you're like, well, I need the money. And the guy's like, okay, 50%. So then you take your most charismatic character, somebody who's got some charisma and some balls. So we'll say the human noble, because this guy, basically, he has a high charisma, if I remember, and he has persuasion. So that'll be helpful. So the DC challenge rating for this prick here in the store doesn't want to sell you anything. So he wants to give you 50%, and you had to basically almost die to get this stuff. So you're like, no way, 50% is too low. So we're going to persuade him to take this price up, or this percentage up. So the way I'm going to do it for myself is anything above 15, that's the DC. So I'm going to have him drop this in the dice tower. The difficulty rating is 15, it's very difficult. And the guy is a stubborn SOB. So if you roll above 15, for every point at 15 or above, you will gain 5% more. So if you roll 20, you can get up to 75%. That's how I'm going to do this. So let's see what he rolls. Now, if he fails, there's going to be a whole nother thing going on. So I'm going to have him drag this particular check into the dice tower. So he's going to do his persuasion. He rolled a frickin' 2. So you got a total of 6. The guy shakes his head. Nope, not going to happen. 50%. So then finally, this hill dwarf, he says, bullshit. So he gets pissed off. He steps up and he goes, look here, buddy. We fought hard for this. And if you don't give us more for our items, I'm going to punch you in the damn nose. So he has an intimidation ability, which is in his skills. And he has intimidation. It's not too bad, +3. So he's going to basically wind up his fist and say, look, you don't sell us that crap at a better price, I'm going to knock your block off. So the storekeeper's like, well, so we'll see what happens. So same problem. He needs to roll over a 15 because the guy's a real tightwad. But he's going to be at disadvantage because they've already tried to bargain with him and they failed utterly. So I'm going to give this guy disadvantage because this is a tougher thing to do, to threaten a guy. And this guy is a real stickler for prices. So he's at disadvantage, but he still gets a shot at it. So let's see. If he rolls a 15, they'll get a higher price for it. So let's see what happens. Intimidation, dice tower, and he rolled a 12. So now that they've failed, now that he's failed, what he's going to have to do is call the guards because they threatened him. He sends a runner out. This is the guy that runs the store. Sends a runner out and lets all the other vendors know that your party's coming and that you are a troubled group and that you're not willing to pay the set price. So that really screwed the party on getting a better price. And as a matter of fact, 45% is now a selling price. So you failed in your negotiations. So now I'm going to sell the crap at 45% of value. So everyone's kind of grumbling and pissed off, but they have to go for it. So I'm going to click this arrow. And right now, everything is sold. And it's up here in this queue, and the earring is still there because the high elf wanted it, but it's still in the queue to be awarded to her. So once I click this down arrow, all of the treasure and the items are now assigned to the players. So all this stuff here is now part of the party sheet. So now down here, I click this refresh. It rebuilds the party's inventory. It tells me who has what. And then any leftover items that are not divisible by 5 will remain here. So when they get more treasure, they can build this up and it'll award out, or I can convert it all to silver, whatever you want to do. But Fantasy Grounds does not automatically convert it to the next denomination. So you have to do that manually. So that is how I would handle a store situation for my table. Now that's a lot to go through. Some people don't want to do all that stuff, but that's an effective way to run a store or a transaction. So now I'm going to go to the order sheet. This is where you set your watch order. So basically, the dwarf gets up first. So he's last watch. He's the first one to bed. He's the first one up. The others, let's see, the high elf, she will be on third watch because she likes to stay up and read. The Lightfoot criminal is kind of a night owl, so he gets up after she goes to bed. And then the 2 warriors usually go to bed fairly early. They take first watch. So here's my established watch order now. Now I'm not going to do anything with this right at the moment, but you can set it up to where when you have encounters, you can decide whose watch it was on, or you can also put them in pairs. So if you have a large party, you have like 8 people or something like that, you can put both paired together on certain watches. It all depends on how you're playing and the time. So this is generally the watch order that we have when it's at night, when they're sleeping, or if they have to rest. That's generally the watch order. For the marching formation area, I don't really use this that much other than if I'm doing Theater of the Mind, I might use this just for the sake of, for my own sanity, so I know where everyone is in space. So you can still describe the situation with no maps, no tokens, those sort of things, and just use these to kind of keep a reference for who's where. Another thing I use this for is if you have a player that insists on flying or you have someone that wants to dive underwater, I use that for this. So instead of just making it up or not having any reference, I will take, like, for instance, this uh, line here, and I'll make this a water line. So I'm going to draw that. So here's the water. Forgive the drawing, it looks like crap, but and then I'm going to draw a little boat in here. And then the party is going to be in the boat, just kind of represented by the tokens. And then this guy, this criminal, is actually diving down to get something. So maybe there's a rope holding on to him. And basically, I can set this scale however I want in the terms of Theater of the Mind. So you can say 1 square is, 10 fathoms or whatever you want to call these, feet or whatever. But it gives you an idea of the distance between here and there. And then if you want to draw a shark in there or whatever, you can do that. Looks like a whale. We'll say this is a blue whale.
Put the octopus in there.
So anyways, this might be a way that you can keep track of altitude and depth. So if you have a flying character, you can do it the opposite. And the way I do it is if they're flying around and they have a potion of flying or something like that, I might say that each square is 20 feet. And if they get outside a certain range, then they won't be able to target anybody. And it'll be luck if they hit anybody. So that's a good way to keep track of people that are flying around. And it's annoying when they think that they can be 200 feet up in the air and drop something on a target and hope that it hits. I think you'd have to roll a 20 or something like that to make that happen. So if you're going to be using flying characters, this is what I use to kind of figure that out. But then again, you can also use this as a combat map. So if you don't have a map ready, you can use this.
But you can't target in it.
Correct. You can't really use it for targeting or anything unless you drag the tokens over from the combat tracker, but it's still kind of screwed up. So it's not really useful for combat, so to speak. Let's see. Now you have the party sheet where you keep track of your experience points. So all of them have 300 to go to get to level 2. So if they complete items in the campaign, you have parcels, which is your treasure and coins, your loot, and then you have your quest items. So quest item, parcels. So these are 2 different kinds of XP awards. One's for combat, one's for story related. So if they chase the dragon in Lost Mine of Phandelver, they get 2,000. If they defeat, let's see, let me go to the encounters. If they defeat the goblins, we'll say, there you go. So that's the wrong one. Okay, so the goblin trail isn't worth anything, but if you wanted it to, you can crack this open, and if they detect the traps, maybe you'll give them 50 to remove and identify the traps, whatever. So now I'm going to click award, and it automatically splits the XP amongst the party. And I'm going to click award over here, and it does the same thing. It divides it up. So now when you look up here, it's time to level. So all of these characters have 450 versus 300. So then maybe after the session or before the next session, you'll level up. So that's how the party sheet is used. It's a very useful tool. It's probably one of the best things I like about Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back where I had it, and I'm going to dismiss it. And I'm going to start setting up for session 1, and that will be the combat, and it will also kind of get into these character sheets, how these are used. So what I generally do is I get all the characters lined up in one column. So when I'm playing, I don't have to keep moving these things around. So I'm going to get it all set up to where I don't have to keep shuffling character sheets around, and it makes it a lot easier when you're playing. So I'm getting them all here, all ready to go before the session. So if I need to look at it, it's right where I need it. And I'll also do this with the NPC stat blocks. If I have a bunch of them, I'll get them lined up here as well. So now I have everybody's sheet. Now I'm going to go to the Actions tab and make sure that all of them are in combat and actions. That's it, that's right. So you don't want to be doing this during the game. So it's good to have all this stuff set ahead of time. Looks like I got most of them. Yep, that's right. Okay, so all the characters are lined up here, ready to go. Now, I need to run the first chapter of this adventure Lost Mine. So here they get into this ambush with some goblins along the road on the way to Phandelver. So if you crack this story open and you change this to chapter 1, you have all these pieces of that. So I think for session 1, I'm only going to probably get to where they find the hideout. I think that's all I'm going to plan for. So that you start, you have an index, you have the goblin arrows, they explain how they get there. They talk about the ambush, and then the aftermath is they go out potentially and look for the Kragmaw hideout. So I'm going to go to notes, and again, I'm going to get the calendar out. So the next session is going to be the 26th Friday. And this is going to be session 1. Okay. And next is I'm going to put a note here. So here's travel to Phandalin. And for the notes, this time I'm going to call it session 1. And I'm going to link it over here. That way I have access to it. And then the calendar date, I'm going to link it back over to here. So I'm going to that and that. This is our next session, we'll say, the 26th. All right. I'm going to set the calendar. Now it will report it right. Okay, 26. And we'll say we had to make it later. So it's at 2 instead of 1. The DM had to go cook dinner or something like that, or lunch. Okay, so there's 2 p.m. on this day. So I'm going to drag this journal entry onto the session 1. So you go to logs. Here's the 26. There we go. Now I'm going to set up what I'm going to study and prepare for. So session 1 now replaces session 0 down here. And now I'm going to go ahead and drag over what I want to work on. So definitely want the index. I want this, the ambush, and the Kragmaw hideout. That should pretty much be 2-3 hour session depending on your players and how you play. You might go further, but I think this is about as far as I'm going to prepare for. Another thing is this particular ambush, it doesn't come with a map. So it tells you that you're gonna meet the goblins. They're gonna sneak out on you. This is kind of set up for theater of the mind. So you read this stuff. It tells you, all this different encounter notes, and that's what makes this module really cool because it kind of tells you how everything should go. But as a new DM, that's really great. As an experienced DM, you may do something completely different than what it says here. So it is very useful if you are able to do your own thing, but it's also useful to have these encounter notes. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to prepare this for the rest of my notes here. So for the goblin ambush, I'm going to put the encounter up here. And I don't know, maybe this link here. And the traps in case they get that far. And here's the story award. So pretty much everything here is in a row. And I'm just going to focus on this particular material. So now that's where I have it shortcutted down here. So when I go to play, all the players are connected. I bring up session 1. So we'll just say I just connected to the table. There's session 1. Here's all the stuff that I researched. I have a couple more things I need to do before the game starts. So maybe I have a half an hour before the game. So I want to use a map. I don't want to use Theater of the Mind to run the combat. I mean, it's fairly simple, but I think it's much easier if you have some sort of visual representation. So with that in mind, when I was exploring this module, I found these photos. So here's the cover. Here's a cool picture of the goblins. I might show that to them at some point. So I'm going to drag that over to my notes. However, I'm going to preload this image in case I want to use it. So I'm going to right click on it, click sharing, and I'm going to preload it. That way, if I need to use it, it's already loaded in the background. So that'll preload the image before we even start playing once everyone connects. So it might slow down connection a little bit, but once it's downloaded, it's downloaded. It's cached on their computer. So I might share that with them for immersion. So I just changed that to photo so I know what the hell it is. And here it's public. So once I've done that, that means that it's basically shared. Now they won't know that I've shared it until I actually bring it up and right click it and click update or share sheet. But it is letting me know that it is now a public record. The next thing I came across is this Tribord Trail. So the way this thing is described in the Goblin Arrows for the ambush says you've been on the Tribord Trail half a day. As you come around the bend, you spot 2 dead horses, blah, blah, blah. Each of them has feathered arrows sticking out of them. The woods press close to the trail here with a steep embankment on and dense thickets on either side. Well, that's exactly what this looks like. So I'm going to use this for my battle map. Even though it's not a strategic top-down, it'll help me run the combat. So I'm going to link this over here. It's really not a map, but I'm going to use it for a map. So I'm going to unlock this, right click on here, set the layers because I'm going to actually set a tile on here or a grid. And I'm just going to make a grid about, I don't know, 50, 60 pixels. It doesn't really matter as long as it works for you. And that's basically your grid. So this is Tribord Trail. So if this was a map that I imported, I would rename it as map, comma, Tribord Trail if it was a map. In this case, it's just a photo. And then here, I'm just going to put Tribord Trail. That's what the players see. But my notes, it's going to say Goblin Ambush. Now, I don't want them to see that. I want them to see this Tribord Trail. So that's why I did the hidden ID. So now I'm going to lock it, and that's ready to go. I'm going to link the photo in case I want to show the players that. I'm going to link the encounter. And I'm going to link my notes. So this. So everything's kind of linked back and forth, and everything's where I need it to be. So I'm going to close this session 0 or session 1. And I'm going to also decide to preload it, and that's provided no one's connected yet. So now this is set to preload. So when they connect to the table, it'll automatically start downloading in the background. So now I'm pretty much ready to go for this first session. I might go ahead and link the map since that's where most of the action is. So I'm going to put it in the hotkeys. And that's it. Now, this thing was set up as an ambush. So if you read it, it says the goblins are on either side of the road. which I think is kind of cool. I mean, it gives you a chance to flex your DM muscles and creativity. So instead of just saying, okay, there's 4 goblins, fight, what we're going to do is set up the ambush. Now, I'm not sure how this works in Theater of the Mind, but for this, for some kind of battle map type thing, I'm going to bring up the encounter, and instead of sending them to the combat tracker and then dragging them on here, because this is not a random encounter, this is something that's already in place. I'm going to go ahead and place them ahead of time. So I'm going to put 1 goblin here, another one up here. I'll put 1 over here, and probably 1 down here. So this is kind of just a rough idea of where they are in space. This isn't an accurate battle map by any means, but it gives you an opportunity to use this as a tool. So now once they're placed, if I close this, they'll disappear, but they're still on here. I guarantee you they are. Once I bring up that encounter and it's the party's there. So let's just say the party has arrived to this point in the map. So I'm going to drag this green helmet over so it takes everyone over at once. I'm going to put them on the battle map or the photo. And that is how it's done. Now, once they've got here, I will read that passage that comes from the story. And it says there's 2 dead horses up above. Well, we can do Theater of the Mind for that. If they recognize the horses from a previous encounter, it gives you an opportunity for that. And then once they reach the horses, the goblins come out. So it says the goblins have a stealth check that they can perform before the combat ensues. So it says to bring up their stat block, which I'm going to do. And I'm going to put the stat block right here so I don't have to keep looking for it. And it says that they have a +6 on stealth, which I see right here. And I'm going to roll that against the passive perception of the party. So if the party members did not specify that they were on the lookout for goblins or something like that, then I will give the goblins the benefit of the doubt and just let them roll against the party's passive perception. If any one of these guys says, oh, I'm going to scout ahead, I'm going to look for enemies, goblin territory, if they were like a ranger and their goblins was their favorite enemy, and it was in the wilderness and they're used to being in the woods and that's their favorite landscape, then I would give them a chance to do a perception roll instead of just a passive perception. So I'd reverse this. So in this case, I'm going to give the goblins the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to look at the party sheet, which I should have had up. Here it is. And your party members cannot see this. This is DM only. So the only sheets that they might be able to see if you shared is the inventory and the order sheet. So this is secret to only for the DM. So now I'm going to roll against their passive perception. So all these guys basically have a 13, except for the rogue. So I'm just going to put 13 down here as a reminder. And I'm going to roll and see what happens. So these goblins need to be a 13 to be stealthy. Oh yeah, so they rolled a 21 total. So they have basically gained the element of surprise. Now, the other way I would have run this is 21. If one of the party members was a ranger, like let's say this one kind of has ranger-like qualities. And the abilities tab, or excuse me, the skills, if they had like survival or, tracking or something like that. In this case, this one has perception. So if they were out actively looking for trouble, then I would have them roll this in the dice tower to beat that 21. And no. So they are surprised regardless. So whoever went out to scout didn't do a very good job. And in this case, the goblins got the element of surprise anyways. So now that tells me that the goblins are going to get basically like a free attack before the round start. So I'm going to pull up that encounter again, and I'm going to go ahead and click the down arrow. And now they are on the battle map. They're not visible yet, but they're on there. So close that. And now I'm going to move the combat tracker up to this location. And this goblin gets to attack first. They have the element of surprise, so I might give them advantage. And we'll see what happens here. So this goblin kind of pops his head up out of his hiding place, pulls out his short bow, and he tries to nail the human folk hero with his short bow. So I'm going to go ahead and target this individual. I do that by first making sure that you're on the goblin, and then you click with the left control key to target. So you hold the left control key and you click the left mouse button on there, and it shows targeted right here. So now all you have to do is double click on the attack roll. And if you want to know the distance, you just mouse over the goblin and it shows you 20 feet distance. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and double click for the attack. And he rolled at advantage because he got like kind of like a sneak attack, and he hit. So it dropped to 15, but it kept to 15, and he has +4 from his dexterity or his attack roll. So now all I have to do is double click the damage. And that particular character took 5 points of damage. So that arrow went flying through the bushes and basically caught underneath her plate, right where her shoulder, her pauldron, and her shirt is. So it got him right in the shoulder. So that's his turn. So the next goblin goes, it's this guy out here. So he moves out of hiding. He's no longer invisible, so he's now visible. And so is this goblin, because they gave up the ghost. And basically, he is going to roughly do the same thing, except for he's going to use his javelin. So I'm not really going to target for this, because this is just a one-time thing. So I'm going to drag the attack roll onto the given target, and he's going after the biggest target, which is this big barbarian-looking noble dude. So he's going to I'm going to drag this javelin attack and drop it right on this guy. And that is a hit. So he scored a good hit, rolled quite a bit over. So what he did is he ran up, chucked that thing. That thing went lobbing through the air and hit him right square in the chest. So now I need to make sure I'm dragging the damage from the missile attack. And did 7 points of damage. So that's heavy damage to that character. So when you're running this encounter, this thing is pretty much 50-50. So it's balanced to the T. I mean, it's pretty close. The thing here is if the goblins get the jump on the players, there is a likelihood you're going to have someone die. Not necessarily, but the likelihood is higher. So if you don't want that to happen, don't let the goblins get the jump on the party. If you don't care, then let it fly. So just be careful with encounters like this, is play them out by yourself. You can do this like I'm showing you right now to kind of get an idea of how this is going to play out. So what this is showing me right now, though, is the party members haven't even attacked yet. I have to roll initiative again, and if the party members don't do a good roll, they're not going to get any attacks, and they might even lose a couple people here. So you got to be careful with encounters, but at the same time, you don't want to cheat and, make the goblins weaker than they are. So it's all about balance. So this guy comes out of hiding, but he took basically the same cue from his friend. So he's now visible, and they're getting rid of their one-time use thing. So he is going to throw it at the dwarf, and he missed. So he just lobbed it, and it fell short. So then he's going to move back, so he has more movement, and that is his nimble escape. So now he's trying to hide as a bonus action. So he's supposedly hidden. So I'll put him in the hidden status just so I remember. This goblin is going to move forward. He's going to run up, take this attack of opportunity, get advantage, and get it. So here we go. So he's going to use a scimitar, and he's going to get advantage because he has the sneak surprise attack. So I'm going to go ahead and give him that. And he hit. So now he's going to do a devastating blow to this guy's thigh. And that wicked little dagger just ended his life, or that scimitar. So that guy is dead. So this human barbarian guy, or noble, he's dead. So the goblin took him out. So now I have to roll initiative, because that was a surprise round. So I'm going to go to menu, initiative, and in this case I'm going to roll for everybody because I don't have anyone connected to the table. So now it reshuffles, and it looks like the goblins get to start first. So now the actual rounds take place. So as you can see, things aren't going so well for the party. So this is a likelihood that can happen to your group. As you can see on the party sheet, you got person dead and a person that's half dead, and then you got 3 other people up. So this is not looking good for the party. So like I said, if you're worried about them dying, you need to scale it back, possibly leave the ambush part out. If you don't care, go ahead and run it. So that's kind of how this plays out. So when you're done with this combat, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but when you're done with this combat, you will give the awards and you will give the experience points, any loot. This particular encounter doesn't give you any loot, so I think that's kind of crappy. What I would have done is I would have made a small parcel with a couple coins and maybe that scroll case that they left behind that's empty. Maybe have some blood stains on it or something like that. And give them a couple coins because when they go out there and they kill or they take a Sildar and a Gundren, they might have, captured them, but maybe a couple coins got dropped on the ground. So that's something I would have added to the encounter, as I'd give them a little something so that they have at least one little coin or two for their efforts. Now, if no one died, you can do a short rest. Fantasy Grounds will keep track of this guy that he's dead right now. So if I go through, I'm just going to scroll through quickly here. It automatically rolls his death save. He succeeded. If you go to his character sheet, on the front, it'll say he was successful. This time he was successful, so he's on his way to being at least stable. So provided that it played out this way.
I can't believe that your entire party rolled so bad that they let the goblins all get in their attacks
Oh, I
first.
know. So now he's stable. He's no longer unconscious. He's stable. So he rolled 3 successful death saves in a row. So these are just some of the things that you might come across in a given combat scenario. So I'm going to wrap this up. I think this has been a good run. It's been an hour and a half. Next time I will add probably some custom things. I might even bring in a different map instead of using the photo. Show people how to do that, and also we'll build some custom content for the adventures. Like I said, I want to build that parcel for this first encounter. I may want to build a goblin that is unique to the setting and to my campaign. And if he survives, he will be the goblin that leads them to the Cragmaw hideout, because there is an aftermath in the things that if you don't kill all the goblins and you capture one of them, I might make that guy their ally in the future or something like that because they took pity on remorse on him. So there's all kinds of branches that you can take from this one encounter. You can have a surviving goblin that becomes their friend only by necessity, or maybe he's just pretending. And then you have a parcel that you can potentially make, which will make the fight a little bit more worth their time. And then you can also add your own custom map so you don't have to use the photo, but I think this photo does a really good job. And then you can also add anything you want to your campaign. It doesn't wreck the module, it kind of adds it to it. And if you're worried about it being corrupt, you can just revert back. So you can revert changes in the module screen, or you can put them in separate groups and export it out. And then when you play this module again, you can load your piece of the module that you created and load it with the campaign. So is there any other questions?
There's no other questions right now, but people are saying keep doing this. They really are liking our class.
Okay.
And I wanted to also say that not this Saturday, but next Saturday, we're going to be streaming my Turtle Spear teaser. Sphere. I got to say that right. It's not a spear that you throw. Turtle Sphere teaser. On Saturday, we're going to be streaming that on our channel here. And then on the 20th, we're going to be streaming a advanced DM topics where Laerun will be teaching how to make backgrounds, classes, races, that kind of thing. So you can look forward to those two events for sure.
Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Lady Shel, for moderating. I know Rob and Victor were out there. It was good to see you guys show up, and the rest of you that are out there. So, anyways, happy gaming, everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Night. Thanks, Laerun. Was a great class.
You're welcome, guys. Take care.